All right. Well, a very warm welcome to the person joining us live via YouTube, and a warm welcome to Toshan. And I want to get your name. Give me one more.
Just use Michael.
And Michael, who are joining us live here. I normally start off when I do these things. I normally say, "Hello, divine creations, divine marvels, children of God." And those are exact words that Bruno Groening used. But what does it mean? Well, first of all, there's idea why a child of God? Why? And what Bruno Groening said is that we need God. He was adamant. He said the human being is a creation of love and can only live in love. And he said only God can raise us up or exalt us. The German word has multiple meanings. Obviously, as human beings, without God, it's possible to achieve. I can go out and change a tire without asking God's help, without having a connection to God. But to really do anything of significance on the spiritual path, um, in so many different ways, Bruno Groening said that we need God. Now, one of which is a philosophical idea that we've all heard, and in some sense we all try and live. I do on my path, and I know on the Krishna consciousness path, that's a fundamental seeking to serve God, be a servant of God, and being humble. Bruno added a very interesting nuance, saying that as human beings, as immortal souls in this body, part of what's needed is for us to literally take in what he called in German Heilstrom, which can be translated as healing stream, divine energy, the energy that saves, medicinal force, all these different words to point towards a life healing energy that's from God. He said that as human beings, we absolutely need it. And so throughout this whole time together, and I see, Michael, you've already begun, I want to invite you to practice something he taught, which he called it tuning in or attuning, to absorb this energy. And the way to do it is really simple. The physical posture is to not do this. He said this can create a short circuit, and even if possible, not to have your feet or even your fingers touching, palms upwards. You can do it lying down. It's more, in my experience, more powerful sitting up or standing. To have what I believe both of you already have, which is openness to these ideas, and then to ask God for help, to ask God for his healing life energy. That's the intention, and then the actual practice is to observe the body with the will, the intention to absorb this energy, to take it in, to be not only connected to God, but to receive this healing stream. It's written that Christ called this divine energy the waters of life, to literally take in, just as we know we need breath to live. Bruno Groening said we actually need the energy of God to thrive and be healthy. Welcome, Barbara. Thank you so much for joining in. So now let's spend a few minutes doing this simple thing, observing our body, having the will, the intention to take in divine healing energy. observing the body, noticing the sensations, letting thoughts go, intending to receive the energy of God. Taking in the good, noticing what you feel. If the mind is just racing, you can focus on your breath, you can repeat a mantra. So we're going to spend our time together taking this energy in. There'll be periods of silence. I'll share a little bit here and there. And even as there's talking going on, I invite you to continue to observe your body. You're welcome to keep your eyes closed. If that, when I go to attend a meeting like this, that's what I do. I sit there the whole time with my eyes closed, taking in the energy, listening, but also really listening and feeling the energy. Welcome to Fabio from Italy. Welcome to Barbara from Norway. Thank you so much for joining in. So here we are in 2019, observing our bodies, drinking in the energy of God. I'd like to back up a little bit to give a little context for where these ideas came from. So in post-World War II Germany, in a country that was a wreck in ways that we can't even fathom, the country had been split in half, they'd lost a war, the German psyche was, I can't fathom what it was like to be a German at that point in time. The world hated Germany, thought Germany was evil, and most Germans probably thought that the German people were evil. And amidst chaos that we can't really fathom, what I consider to be one of the most fantastic events in the history of humanity happened. Mass healings occurred. Paralyzed people stood up out of their wheelchairs. Blind people regained their vision. Cases of, you know, psychotic levels of PTSD vanished. Cancer vanished. So forth and so on. We don't know how many healings, you know, and I sometimes try and estimate. It's like 30, 40, 50,000. Healings occurred under the direct observation of medical doctors. And so this all happened around a very humble and very simple man named Bruno Groening. And of himself, he never took credit for any of the healings. He said he was merely an instrument of God and a servant of God. He spoke of what we've touched on a little bit, a healing energy that that he said humanity had forgotten about. Basically, what he said was that what he was teaching was nothing new, merely ideas that had been forgotten. The other thing he said is that what he was teaching was solely and only the teachings of Jesus Christ. And for anyone who's familiar with Christ and his teachings, I think you'll find a lot of parallels. So, as human beings, Bruno Groening described our journey as this, that we are immortal souls on an unfathomably vast journey. Unfathomably vast. And that here we are in a human body on this planet. And so we have this corporeal body, but he spoke of us. He would straight up ask people, "Are you the body?" This was 1949, Germany. This wasn't Santa Cruz. People hadn't heard of things like Vedanta, or so if they were like, "Yes, I'm the body," like what kind of question is that? And Bruno would say, "No, you're not the body. The body is a gift to you from God, and a precious gift." And he taught people how to take care of their body. Now, I'm broadcasting this from Santa Cruz, California. We have massage schools, yoga schools, acupuncture, organic food up the wazoo. I love all those things. And that's not exactly what Bruno Groening meant when he said take care of the body. He was very adamant about doing things that were natural. In fact, he went so far as to say nature is God, and that we need to live in harmony with nature, with creation. But in essence, what he said is that um, this body was literally designed to not just live on food and drink, but to also live on spiritual energy. That's natural, and that's actually how these bodies were designed. Of course, in ancient China, the idea of qi was at the center of their culture. And in India, you find the idea of prana as a very central place in not just the idea of wellness and health, but of life itself. So the way he taught people to take care of their body is to take in this energy, and in essence, to take in this energy from God and let it, the energy, remove everything not good. Bruno Groening was adamant um, that disease of any kind is is not some kind of punishment, but merely the effects of us transgressing um, the laws of nature, and ultimately, right, the law of love, of treating ourselves and the world correctly or harmoniously. Mm. And so, as human beings and as a soul in a human body, here on this earth, he pointed out that that there are two primary energies. He used very simple words. Guten, which is German for good, but it also means wholesome, harmonious. And Bosse, which is often translated as evil, but which also means nastiness or viciousness. He said that as human beings, we live right in between these two forces, and that which one we tune into determines everything in our life. So let's sit with all that for a little bit. This idea of us on a vast journey here in this body, and that maybe, right? Yeah, each Bruno Groening was adamant. He said, he literally said, "Don't believe what I say. Find out for yourself." He said, "You have a duty to convince yourself of the truth." So let's spend a little time reflecting. Is it possible that one of, if not the main, a main form of self-care for this body, this temple, this vessel we have for this human experience, is being connected to God and taking in the energy of God? And let's reflect for a little bit. Is Bruno Groening right? Are there two? Um, and of course, if you look into Chinese culture, Indian cultures, they talk about all these different specific types of energy. But here we're talking about sort of the big picture. Is there primarily an energy that serves God and um, another energy that creates disorder, which paradoxically ultimately serves God, and that also we're trying to free ourselves from? So let's spend a little time observing the body, having the intention to absorb the good, to absorb what God wants us to have: happiness, health, harmony, a good life, a harmonious life. Taking in the good, observing the body. noticing what's happening in and on your body. So, so he pointed out that the human soul is, he used it as a metaphor, but he also pointed out that in a very literal sense, our soul is like a radio antenna or a satellite dish, that it can receive a signal, transmission, and energy. He used different words to speak of this, and that which energy we're connected to literally makes or breaks this life for us. This is a point where I feel so much excitement to have both of you two here live. I have two people here for everyone who just joined. I have two people live here who are members of the Krishna consciousness movement. Because and again, if I have any of the details wrong, please let me know. My understanding is that in Krishna consciousness, there's three primary energies. There's the intrinsic energy of God or Krishna that's totally pure and incapable of being corrupted. There's the energy of the soul, which I believe is called the marginal, which is also inherently divine, yet can be overcome by this third energy, which I believe is called external energy. And that all of our problems, all of our problems come from associating with this third energy, marginal energy, as opposed to associating with the intrinsic or pure energy of God, of Krishna. Now, while the wording is slightly different, Bruno Groening spoke of good and evil and of tuning in. It was actually in reading your literature and reading about these three energies that I finally understood what Bruno Groening meant. That, oh my God, my soul is receptive, and which pole of energy, whether I'm tuning into or associating with God, or if I'm associating with in this, in Bruno Groening's word, the energy of evil, in the words of Krishna consciousness, associating with the energy, the external energy, that determines everything, everything in this life, and that the meaning of life is to associate with God, or again in this language, to tune in to the energy of God and being led by that energy. And so, in terms of health, Bruno Groening described it very simply. He said the human being is and remains divine, that there's an aspect of our soul, just as in in Krishna consciousness. There's an aspect of our soul that is is divine and cannot be corrupted. However, it can associate or be sort of covered over, in a sense, by this other energy, which is not only less than pure, but leads this mysteriously, leads this divine soul down a very dark, painful path, and even leads us to harm each other. The three of us here live, we're all people on a spiritual path, striving to be good people. And yet, when I look at my life and some of the things I've done, I'm like, how could I have done that? Well, Bruno Groening offers a very simple way of looking at it. He said that when we take on evil, again, when this divine soul is covered over by evil, we actually have to serve that evil until we free ourselves from it. And how to free ourselves from it? He said, the good removes evil, meaning the energy of God is that which frees us and liberates us from that. And so this can show up in negative thinking and evil, negative thinking, negative behavior, and then at a certain point, as illness in the body, as disorder. Sometimes when speaking of God, Bruno Groening would call God the good, which I translate as goodness itself. Love. He used words like love, life, harmony to describe that which made us. And so we're all on the path, finding our way back to that good, to life, to love, to harmony. So one of the key things he taught for how to do that is to take in this energy, to recognize that we live in between these two forces. And, we start here in a gathering, practicing tuning in. Ultimately, he said, we want to tune in every moment of every day. Every moment of every day, our hearts want, and we actually need to be connected to God. On a spiritual plane, on a more physical plane, for there to be order, balance, and harmony in our lives, we need, and of course, again, it starts as a practice, and then we take it out into the streets, and then we try and live being connected to God. But for there to be harmony in our bodies, and then harmony in our lives, well, he said it very simply. If you want to succeed, you need to follow God. So let's spend a little more time in silence, taking this in, reflecting on this idea that of free will. He said God gives free will. God doesn't force us to follow God. Though at a certain point, life becomes excruciatingly painful when we don't. So, in a very simple way, let's seek God. Let's ask God for help and then observe our bodies, intending to receive that, to take it in. moment by moment, choosing God, moment by moment, tuning in, attuning to God. So, just to review a little bit, so we've looked at the idea of healing energy, of divine energy. We've looked at the idea of an immortal soul that has a receptive capacity. We've looked at the idea of the opposite of healing energy. Um, Again, in your tradition, it's material energy is the translation, or external energy. And the idea of free will, that God doesn't force God's, God doesn't force him, her, itself on us. And life doesn't really work without God. So, more specifically, physical, then how does all this relate to physical healing in the body? Well, as we looked at, physical illness, according to Bruno Groening, is nothing more than a symptom of having associated with evil, or having associated with what you would call, again, external energy. And so the fundamental cure is God. As humans, as um, again in your tradition, as beings of marginal energy, we're not able to free ourselves. If we were, we wouldn't need a guru and we wouldn't need God. We would just free ourselves from this force. Bruno Groening said that once someone has taken on a certain amount of evil, they cannot free themselves. They need higher power, a higher power, to free themselves. And um, so part of this is humility of recognizing in this life or another life, I've made some mistakes. I've associated with, I've connected to the wrong energy source, which is, yeah, which is also the wrong consciousness, which I'll speak about in a moment. There's also the recognition of this thing called evil, external energy. It's actually stronger than me on my own. While I am a child of God, I'm a child. I need, um, I need God to um, to help me find freedom from this. Then he kept it very simple. He said the good dispels the evil, that it can happen in an instant. And I've had healings that have happened in instants. I've had healings that have taken years. I have a friend who's very devoted to this path. She had a heart condition that diagnosed, tested, on paper, that killed members of her family. They died from it. And it took her 20 years. And eventually it healed. They did the tests. The heart condition was gone. I know people who've come to a meeting just such as this, their first meeting, and things have vanished. The ways of God are mysterious in the timing of a healing. And it is, Bruno Groening said, you don't demand from God, obtain. It's not our place to order God around. It's okay to ask for healing, to plead even for healing, but to demand it is not our place. So a key aspect of what facilitates physical healing, and interestingly enough, facilitates the entire spiritual path, is the recognition that God is the supreme power in the universe and that all things are possible. As Christ said that all things are possible through God, as Bruno Groening said that God is the supreme physician for all of humanity. If you name an illness, I've either healed it myself, I personally know someone who has, or I've read a medically documented report. Um, Personally, again, personally, when I found this teaching, my body was falling apart. Bipolar depression, insomnia. I was on 4 medications. Um, my immune system was shot. I was getting sick about 6 times a year. I was sick 60 days out of every year. I was sick at least. Every week, I was fighting off sore throats. My eyesight was failing. Had trouble walking upstairs because of knee issues. I was 39 years young, and this body was falling apart. I had heart trouble. Trying to think what else. It was pretty gnarly. I was 39 years young, and I was like, I might just have a couple more chronic fatigue, always tired. And all those things I just mentioned, minus with the insomnia, it took a little longer to get off. I said 4 medications. One of them, it took a little longer. Everything I just mentioned was healed in 9 months. And I was ridiculously devoted. I was doing this practice 3 hours a day because I had to, because my eyes were so bad. Once I woke up, I had to put on sunglasses, wear them all day long, and spend 4 or 5 hours with my eyes closed because my eyes burned so bad. So I was kind of forced into this practice. And the good news is I had healing after healing after healing. Knees. I had some issues with my solar plexus, the heart condition. Oh, I forgot, a pinched nerve, the chronic sore throat, um, the eyesight. As I said, I got off all 4 medications, 3 of them within 9 months. The bipolar healed. I was a bit of an extreme example, but I also dove into this practice because kind of at that point my life depended on it. But of all those things, I'd say the most miraculous healing was actually the first healing, which I didn't ask for. I had a second-degree burn on this thumb, which a second-degree burn is where the top layer of skin is permanently burnt off, doesn't grow back. And so I just had this red spot. And in like my fourth or fifth meeting, I was sitting there tuning in, and then I noticed that of their own volition, my fingers were doing this. Or just kind of one finger was rubbing that thumb. I'm like, that's weird. I just kind of watched it for a little bit. And I looked down and I was shocked. The bright red spot had turned light red. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on. Well, over the next week and a half, it changed colors, light red to dark pink to light pink to pale to white to pale to skin to where the fingerprint grew back. And at that moment, I knew what Bruno Groening said was true, that for God, nothing is incurable, nothing is impossible. In the medical paradigm, um, my doctor straight up said, he's like, well, and I'd had this for 3 years. Uh, he said, well, the part of the skin that grows back has been destroyed. You'll have it for the rest of your life. I didn't go to this thing to have my thumb healed. I had more serious problems. I was like, whatever, I'll have this little spot. Um, and watching the physically impossible, by the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology, impossible happen in my own body. You know, people often quote Bruno Groening as saying that Bruno said, nothing is incurable, nothing is impossible. But I started to study German, and actually what he said is, incurable does not exist, and God is not impossibility, which, if I understand it correctly, God is limitless possibility. God is limitless. It's very interesting. God is not impossibility, meaning that God, as human beings, our entire experience is limitation. Like, I don't know how to be here and on my favorite beach in Thailand at the same time. Like I can only eat one thing at a time. I can, there's all limitation is, as a human being, is every moment of every day, we're up against limits. I'm here and not there. I'm doing this and not that. And so we sometimes impose that on God. Whereas if Bruno Groening is correct and all the different teachings and scriptures are correct, God's infinite, which we as human beings, we can put that word on it. We can say, okay, God is infinite, God is limitless, God can do anything. But to truly fathom that, and then to experience it in our own bodies. Bruno Groening said, if you observe your body will convince yourself of the truth. And that's, and I was convinced. So let's spend a little time now doing the same practice, observing the body, taking in this energy. But let's add a little mindfulness that this energy comes from that which is limitless, that which can do all things, that which made our soul. All we have to, when we want to look at how powerful God is, all we need to do is go look at a tree and just, 1,000 leaves, each one of them their own life. So now as we take this energy in, let's remember that the sender of this energy is truly limitless. It can do all things. Taking in the good. So, Bruno Groening spoke of the effects of good and evil, not just in terms of energy, but also in terms of thought. He said that thoughts have basically one of two sources, from God or this force or consciousness, which he called evil. And so part of this practice is not dwelling on illnesses. Every time, in essence, every time we think, I have this, whatever this is, in a sense, it is a prayer. It is it's a putting attention on illness. So what Bruno Groening called people to is to give the illness away, to give it away to God, to give it away to a spiritual helper that you trust. Bruno Groening said that he himself would gladly accept people's illnesses. He never made any claim to be the only helper, the only um, such being who could do that. And so it sounds a little odd to hand away an illness and then not to think about it and not to talk about it unless necessary. Obviously, if you're talking to a doctor, um, you know, um, there's some things to navigate um, during the healing process that maybe you need to communicate, but to thinking on it and dwelling on it. He said he told people not to sit on their illness. He invited people to give it away, and then from that point on, he used a German word, Regulungen, which means regulation. He just said, once you give an illness away, you don't have an illness anymore. What you have is regulations, or the body regulating itself back into order. I think of it as I have a healing in process. I don't have XYZ, whatever it is, I have a healing in process. But that's a practice to be mindful of our thoughts moment by moment and to only take in good thoughts, but to not dwell on. I'm not saying don't make good choice. I'm not saying don't go to doctors, don't make good choices. Bruno Groening didn't say that. What he said is don't dwell on it. We have this very bad habit of focusing on what's not good. So we'll go for a little bit longer, and I wanted to see if anyone wanted to share what they're feeling as they tune in, or if anyone had any questions.
I definitely feel the energy. I was like, in and out of like waking consciousness. Like, well,
Mm.
I feel it.
And I'm curious, can you put name to the sensation? What does it
Just
feel like?
like a warming in the hands.
Yeah.
And energy in the shoulders. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, definitely felt something.
Nice. So Michael said he could feel the energy and that it was like warmth in his hands and sort of presence in his shoulders.
In the shoulders, yeah.
Yeah. Every time it's a little different. Sometimes hot, sometimes cold, sometimes intense, sometimes peaceful. And sometimes I don't feel much, but usually I feel like right now I feel presence in my hands, like my legs feel this fullness. Yeah. Thanks. Any questions or any? Yeah.
I like the idea of giving away the illness. Like, I don't really think about that. Like, we always do on it. So I can relate to that always. Now I'm just trying to get into that mindset of being aware, like giving away, focusing on it. Not demanding from God, but asking politely and
Having,
having gratitude
nice.
integrated. That counts for a lot. Just I think it's important because people are always, even in my workspaces, individual is just being demanding and just making things very reasonable. And I'm pretty peaceful, but a lot of the people, it's hard. My coworkers are falling on it, and yesterday was a good point. It's just like you just gotta stop dwelling on it. Like, it's just like
Right.
dwelling on all these things, but like just take time yourself. And I always like one quote. It's like just quiet in the mind. The greatest artists, poets, or scientists are when you quiet the mind and don't dwell on anything. Silence and just get into that like a quieted space. Like the most energetic healing sleep is when you don't sleep about anything.
Totally.
The most restful sleep is when there's nothing in the body.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So Michael was just pointing out that just the habit of dwelling and how it doesn't help. And that power of quieting the mind and it's a habit. Dwelling's a habit that everyone on the spiritual path is, I think, working on breaking. Yeah. Mr. Toshan, any questions? Beautiful. So we'll close up in a couple minutes. I'd like to thank everyone who joined in live. So, Bruno Groening said, and I didn't even go into details, he would do energy work on 30,000 people at once. He was quite the powerhouse. People would say being in a room with him, everything vibrated. He was such a transmitter of energy. And actually, interestingly enough, what he said is that we're all receivers and senders of energy. He said, just as I am a big sender, you are a little sender. He never put himself above us. And actually, he said, believe me that I only am an instrument of God and a servant of God, which in fact you are too. You've forgotten. You just don't fully believe. So that's one thing I love about the Krishna consciousness path is the intention is to serve God. Is there any? I think that's really the entire intention of your path is to serve God, and that's exactly what Bruno Groening taught. And taking Bruno Groening's teachings and rereading the Gospels, I see that's exactly what Christ lived and taught. Not my will, thy will be done. And thank you so much to Bruno Groening for reminding us that he said, trust and have faith. The divine power helps and heals. That there is this energy that is available. And we just need to take it in with faith. So to summarize, the recognition that we are a soul that has a receptive capacity, to recognize that God has given us free will. And the primary choice we have moment by moment is between that which is good and that which is not good. Whereas Bruno Groening said that, that which is harmful to life and that which is helpful to life. Not just in action, but in thought. Not just in thought, but in energy. And that we can very simply attune ourselves to God and take in this energy through observing our body. Being mindful of our thoughts, discerning, is this thought a good thought or a negative thought? Meaning, is it going to move me in a direction of more harmony, or is it going to move me further away from God? Is it going to move me into, if I act on this thought, is it going to lead to order or disorder? The disease comes from associating or connecting with this negative pole of energy and consciousness. And that to free ourselves from it, we need divine help. The logic of it is sound. We want to tune into, to turn towards, to lean on, rely on that which is limitless. We as human beings are limited. Part of it is having humility, recognizing that we need help. And asking for that help and then receiving it. But not just receiving it, so we can be healthy, or so we can have lots of energy and go have fun. Not that there's anything wrong with going and having fun. It's a very important aspect of life. But why tune in to God? Why take in this energy? Ultimately, to become a servant of God, to become a helper. We'll call it the great divine work, participating in this great endeavor called life and existence, to serve it, to serve others. And to start with our own house, our own body, to free it from evil. Not that we can't help others before we're completely free of disorder. And if we want to teach the fundamental lesson of life, of connection to God, and therefore freedom from what's not good or freedom from evil, in Krishna consciousness it would be, self-realization versus ego, right? Freeing ourselves from ego so that we can teach self-realization. we need to tend to our own consciousness and our own body so that we can really truly be strong and mighty servants of God. And people such as Bruno Groening and Jesus Christ show us, not just through teaching, but through living. Bruno Groening visited every town in Germany, and the spiritual effect that he was able to have on that country is hard to fathom. And that we can give illness away. Bruno Groening kept it very simple. He said, determine whether, I'm paraphrasing here, determine whether every thought, where it comes from, whether it's good or not. If it's not good, don't take it in. We don't have free will in terms of what thoughts appear to our mind. We do have free will in terms of saying yes or no to a thought. So I'll close with a couple minutes of silence. Bruno Groening said, plead, beg, beseech God for this, his, and he used the German word Gnade, which can be translated as mercy, pardon, forgiveness, grace, that you may be freed from all evil. So I invite us to do that now, to plead to God for grace, mercy, forgiveness, that we may be freed from all evil. So Bruno Groening is no longer physically present. As I said, when he went over in a 10-year period, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 healings occurred. We don't know. And he said, after I am gone, the time will be right for everyone to experience help and healing inside of themselves. Everyone will become their own physician. And he also said, if you call me, I come and help, but don't expect me to come in physical form. No, I'm your friend in spirit. So whether it's Bruno Groening or Christ or another being who you really trust can help free you from this burden of evil, I invite you to call on them and ask for their help. Bruno Groening wasn't concerned about anyone's religion. In fact, he encouraged people to just practice their religion. He didn't seek to convert anyone. He said, practice what you hear in your church or temple. He said, the true teaching is to be connected to God. So thank you so much for joining in. Michael and Toshan joining in live. Thank you so much for everyone who came via YouTube. I wish you a day filled with divine energy. And after a gathering like this, what Bruno Groening advised was for people to sit in silence for as long as they felt called to. And then for a period of time, for me personally, I found it's about 20 to 30 minutes to actually not talk and to be in my own energy. You two are welcome to do what you need to do. And for myself, and I'll be available to talk more another time. So you're welcome to sit here and stay in the energy. Thank you so much for joining in, everyone. Take care. Much love.